Masechet Zevaḥim, Daf Ayin He. The Mishnah taught Kodashim bekodashim min bemino. If sacrifices got mixed up with other sacrifices and they are all of the same type, like you have 10 korban shelamim offerings that are owned by different people, and all of these animals of the same type, all shelamim, get mixed up with each other and we can't tell each apart. Or if all of them were korban chatats and they get mixed up, each one belongs to a certain individual that has to bring a korban chatat and they all get mixed up. In that case, we don't throw them out, but rather we give it to give all of them to the Kohanim, and the Kohanim will sacrifice all of them, and they will have in mind when they do shechita on this particular korban shelamim, it'll be for the owner, whoever it is. They don't know the name of the person that this particular animal is for because they got mixed up, so they have in mind in general. Whoever this is, Hashem, you know who owns this one. It'll be for the sake of that person, and then everyone fulfills their obligation to bring that shelamim or to bring that hatat or whatever type of offering it is. As long as they're all the same, so then the procedure will be the same, so that's totally fine. The Gemara asks, however, many types of korbanot require that the owner put his hands on the head, like a korban hatat or korban shelamim. You have to put the hands on the head and say, this is going to be my korban, and you say, for what you are bringing it. And now, even though, b'di avad, if you didn't do semicha, the korban is still valid. Nevertheless, you're supposed to do semicha, and here you can't do semicha because we don't know who the owner is. You can't do semicha on someone else's animal, then you're putting your weight on it and using the animal, which is not permitted unless it's yours and you're doing semicha. So now we're not going to be able to offer them properly without semicha. Amar Rav Yosef, bekorban nashim, Rav Yosef says that all the individuals that own these korbanot are all women. Women do not have to do semicha. There's a big discussion about whether they can do semicha, and the rabbis concluded that, okay, if they want to, they can do semicha. Not because they have to, but if they really want to, fine. That way, they can feel good that they're doing semicha, but they don't have to. And therefore, if they're all owned by women, then there's no problem. They don't have to do semicha, so we offer all of them without semicha, and that's perfectly fine. If they're owned by men, then it could be, there are cases where if you don't do semicha, then it should not be offered. And so we wouldn't be able to offer them. So if they're all owned by women, then it's okay. Ava bekorban anashim lo. So you're telling me that this whole clause in the Mishnah, where you have sacrifices that are mixed together with others of the same type, let's say korban hatat, this is only, and we offer all of them, that's only if they're all owned and brought by women. Otherwise, if it's brought by men, then this law would not apply and we would not be able to sacrifice them. Is that true? First of all, it's difficult ukimta to limit the Mishnah in such a way, and the Mishnah doesn't say so. But furthermore, we have a challenge from a baraita that teaches. Iti be'abaya. Abaye brings us baraita. Korban yachid shenitare bekorban yachid, bekorban sibur shenitare bekorban sibur, bekorban yachid bekorban sibur shenitarevu ze bazeh. Noten arba matanot mikol echad ve'echad, v'im natan matana mikol echad yasa, v'im natan arba mikulan yasa. Okay, the question is going to be, it's a long braita, so we're going to have to develop the question. But let's understand the braita first. You have an individual korban that got mixed up with another individual korban, just like our case in the Mishnah. Korban hatat with another korban hatat, or olah, whatever it is. Or it's a korban sibur, a communal offering that got mixed up with another communal offering of the same type of animal, or a korban yachid that got mixed up with a korban sibur, and they're mixed up together. And so now we have these animals, or the blood of the animals, and now the kohen is going to offer them. What should he do? And the answer is he should bring 4 placements. He should make 4 placements on the mizbeach of each one of them. When you say 4 placements, so depending on if it's korban hatat, it should be on all 4 corners, or if all of them are korban olaz, then you put it on 2 corners, but it's like 4 because it goes on both walls. So let's say it's a korban hatat. So he's going to put it on each of the 4 corners. He takes of this animal, puts it on each of the 4 corners, that animal, and puts it on each of the 4 corners. And that way, he fulfilled the obligation for both of them. They're both korban hatat, so he's going to offer it as a korban hatat. and he'll have in mind whoever it's for. And if he only gave once for each korban, also he fulfilled his obligation. Because we learned earlier in this Masechet that even though lechatechila, you should have 4 placements for korban chatat, b'diavad, if you only sprinkled once, one fulfilled the obligation. And if one only sprinkled once for all of the blood, if the blood got mixed together, then, and he did it, and he sprinkled them together, then he's 4 placements, but all of them together. So he did 4 of them, but they're all mixed up into 1 cup. Also, he fulfilled the obligation. But that's only b'diavad. If they're separate, then what he should do is, he has a cup from animal A, another cup of blood from animal B. He should take cup A and put it on all 4 corners, and then take cup B and put it on all 4 corners. That's what he should do lechatechila. If he did 1 of each, that's okay. If he did 4 all together and mixed into 1 and put on all 4, that's also okay. When do we say that that's the lechatechila? You should put each of them separately on each of the 4 corners. Shenit arbu hayin, when the animals were mixed up while they were alive, and that way the animals while they're alive they get mixed up, and now we could take each of the blood and put it in a separate cup. However, if it got mixed up after the animal was already slaughtered, and we're going to see later on, this means not only that the carcasses get mixed up, but that the blood gets mixed, and not only that the blood gets mixed in from we don't know which cup is which, but that it gets mixed up into 1 cup. That's the point of nit arbu shechutin. Gemara is going to ask later about the exact language here, but the point is that if all the blood of the different animals get mixed up into 1 cup, then lechatechila, you will have to give 4 sprinklings from all of them together. So it's the same law. It's just saying over here, if they're in separate cups, then you should sprinkle from each cup separately. That's the chatechila. But the avad, if you didn't, you didn't. But here, since it's already mixed up into 1, what could you do? Then you have to sprinkle each one. You sprinkle them all together. They're all in 1 cup, and put it on all 4 corners. And if they're all mixed up in 1 cup, and you only sprinkle once from that mixture, also you fulfilled your obligation, because, as we said, b'diavad, even if you do only 1 sprinkling, that is sufficient. That's all Tanakama. Rabbi Omer, as Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, Ro'ina tamatana im yesh ba kedei lazeh u'kedei lazeh keshera v'im lav pesula. So he agrees with all above. He's just adding another requirement that we have to look at how much blood there is, because he thinks there's a minimum amount of blood. And so you have to see, is there enough blood for this animal and enough blood for that animal within the mixture? Then it's okay. But if there's not sufficient blood, then for both of them, there's only sufficient for 1, then you can't have 1 sprinkling that will fulfill your obligation for both animals or more animals. But rather there has to be a minimum amount for each. That's the end of the Braita. Now here's the point of the challenge. Katane yachid dumya de sibur. Ma sibur gabre af yachid gabre. This Braita compares cases of an individual offering and a communal offering. Now communal offering, that includes everyone in the community, men also, men and women. So too, when it says an individual offering, it must be referring to anyone who brings it. Not only women, but also men. Because otherwise you'd have to say that this is only for men or only for women. And so therefore, this is talking about individual offerings that are brought by men also, since it's comparing it to communal offerings. And it says here that if they are alive, it mentions nitarbu chayin, and you'd have to do, if it's alive, you'd have to do semicha. And here we say, no, we don't have to worry about semicha, and therefore this is a challenge against the Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, if this Mishnah, our Mishnah, applies only if it's korbanot brought by women, because then you don't need to do semicha. But if it were brought by men, then you would not be able to offer these sacrifices. But that can't be true, because in this Baraita, this is referring to individual korbanot brought by men, if you accept this comparison of communal to individual. And you see that it's, even though it's brought by men, and even though they got mixed up when they were alive, and so now you can't do semicha, nevertheless, you can take the blood and you still sprinkle sprinkle it. You do it on all four corners, if you do one, and so on. And even if it gets mixed up, it's all permitted. And so you're allowed to offer the sacrifices and sprinkle them. And you say whoever it's for, then that it'll fulfill their obligation, even though there is no semicha. So you see, Rav Yosef, it applies also to men. So that's the challenge. Amar Rava v'tizbera ha'amit taratztahi. Rava says, wait, how are you understanding this baraita? Is the baraita's language accurate? Let's look at the language more carefully. Tekatane b'medem amurim keshenit arebu chayin avanit arebu shechutin la mali chayim mali shechutin. When the baraita makes a distinction between if the animals get mixed up when they're alive versus when they get mixed up after shechita. Well, actually, what's the difference if they're alive or they do shechita? What we're actually interested in is the blood in separate cups or in one cup, right? That's the distinction. That's what it said. If they're in separate cups, then you should sprinkle each cup separately. Oh, if they're all mixed up in one cup, then it's okay. You can sprinkle them all together from one cup. That's the distinction. It really makes no difference if it's alive or not alive. So rather, you're going to have to understand the baraita as follows. So baraita actually is saying that if the blood all got mixed up, as if they were alive. In other words, in separate cups. Just like when they're alive, the animals are separate. They got mixed up. We don't know which animal is which, but they are separate beings. So that's what it means when it says shechutin. When it says chayim, that they're alive, that they got mixed up as alive, it means actually no, they're not really alive that they got mixed up, but rather they were nishchat, and we put the blood in separate cups, and then the cups got mixed up, and so now we don't know which one is which, but it's in separate cups. And that's the first case, and then the second case where it says shechutin. That means that it's all mixed together, that the blood of all the animals is mixed into one cup. In that case, well, then you have to sprinkle the four sprinklings from that total mixture. And then it says, and if you did only one, then it's permitted. The point is that in this baraita is not talking about a case where the animals got mixed up when they were alive. That's not true. Nitaru chayin just means that like when they were alive, they're separate, so too the cups are separate. Versus if they're not separate and it mixed into one cup. But all these cases is where the animals were identified when they were alive. Since we knew which one was which when they were alive, we could do shechita, we could do semicha. The owners, we know who the owner is. Each owner came and they did semicha. We did shechita. After they did shechita, then we took each one in a separate cup, and the cups got mixed up. That's case number one. Or the cups got poured into each other, and it's all in one cup now. That's the second case. But this baraita is not talking about a case where you can't do shechita, because can't do semicha, because we're talking about a case where the animals were identified beforehand. You did simicha, it's not a problem. And therefore, there's no challenge against Rav Yosef from this, because there's no proof from here that men, even if it belongs to men, you can do semicha. Rather, this is talking about where you did semicha, and therefore there's no challenge from here. And Rav Yosef's answer stands that our Mishnah is talking about a case only where the animals were brought by women. Now that we cited this baraita, let's analyze the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Omer, ro'in et hamatana, im yesh ba kedei lazeh uchedei lazeh kesherav, im lo pesula. We look at the amount of blood that you are using for each placement, and there has to be enough blood for this animal and for that animal. Then it's okay. But if there's not enough blood, then it's no good. You need enough blood for each animal. Does the bee really require a minimum amount of blood? Now we're going to compare what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says regarding paraduma, where you need sufficient water, to what he says says about, well, he would say about blood. So now he's saying, according to the Biur Nasi, you need a minimum amount of blood in order for the sprinkling of blood on the Mizbeach to be okay. But in another Baraita, the B says that according to the opinion of the Eliezer, even if you have a tiny amount of paraduma water, that's okay. You have one drop, that's all right. Because the sprinkling of paraduma water has no minimum amount. And furthermore, not only is it no minimum amount, even if it's mixed up together. You take paraduma water and it gets mixed up half-half. Or even if it's not half-half, even if it's a little bit of paraduma water and a lot of regular water, that's okay, because you only need a little bit of paraduma water. And therefore, it can even be diluted. So what we see from here is that, according to the Biur Nasi, there's no minimum amount for paraduma water, and he's comparing them and assuming that it would be the same law for blood of a sacrifice that's on the Mizbech. There should be no minimum amount. So how come the Biur Nasi in this Baraita says that has to be a minimum amount for each korban? And there's two answers. Number one, lidvarav to the Rabbi Eliezer kamar. Maybe when he says here, Amar Rabbi, according to the Rabbi Eliezer, he would say that there's no minimum amount. But the Biur Nasi himself would say there is a minimum amount for paraduma water and for also blood. He was just giving the opinion of the Rabbi Eliezer here, but he doesn't agree with it. That's one answer. Or another answer, the laws of paraduma are different from the laws of placing blood on the Mizbeach. For paraduma water, you just need a tiny bit of sprinkling, even if it's a small amount. That's true for paraduma waters. That's not the same law as putting blood on the Mizbeach. These are two different categories, and therefore, Rabbi could say that there's no minimum for paraduma water, but there is a minimum of blood, and that's why you need enough blood for each of the korbanot. The next part of the Mishnah teaches, Nit'arebu bibchor u'ma'aser. If you have some type of sacrificial animal, that it's a olah or whatever it is, gets mixed up with a bechor or a ma'aser. In this case, you cannot just offer them all, because they're different types of sacrifices and the procedure is different. And therefore, the Mishnah teaches that one will let them graze until they get a blemish. Now, once they get a blemish, you can't just redeem them all, because a bechor and ma'aser cannot be redeemed. Instead, the law of a bechor and ma'aser is, if they're not blemished, then a bechor is given to a kohen, and the kohen makes it a sacrifice. A ma'aser that's not blemished is kept by the owner. He brings it as a korban also. But once they get a blemish, then a bechor, you still have to give the animal to the kohen, but the kohen can just do shechita like chulin, and he can eat it. Ma'aser also, the owner can do shechita like chulin, and he can eat it. They can also share it. But they have to be eaten with a certain level of tahara, as we'll see, and also have to be treated respectfully. You can't weigh it out on the marketplace with a scale, because it's not respectful to do that to a bechor animal that still retains a certain level of sanctity, even though it has a blemish. And so therefore, in this case, let's say some olah got mixed up with a bechor, so now you have these two animals, you'll have to wait till they get a blemish. And then you'll redeem one of them, whichever one is more expensive. We'll assume that one is the olah. With that money, we'll buy another korban and make that an olah. But the other one is not redeemed because it's a bechor. So instead, both of those animals, we will treat like a bechor or like a ma'aser, whichever one it is, and do shechita and eat it as with the appropriate sanctity regarding a bechor or ma'aser. Amar Rami bar Chama, bechor lebet Shammai en machilin lenidot timurato mahu. This Mishnah is going to come into play in the following discussion. We're going to ask various questions about the status of a bechor, and Rami bar Chama asks, a bechor, according to Bet Shammai, who says that a nida cannot eat a bechor, even a bechor that gets a blemish and can be eaten by anybody. You give it to the kohen and anybody can eat it, but it cannot be eaten by someone who is tameh from within their own body. So that is true according to Bet Shammai. A bechor cannot be eaten by a nida. That we know. The question is, how about a timura, a bechor? If you try to switch and you say, I want the holiness of this bechor to switch onto animal B over there. Well, that's a problem because now the original and animal B are both going to be holy. That's the law of timura. You're not allowed to do that. And if you do it, then both of them become holy. The question is, the stringency that a nida cannot eat a bechor, that will apply to the original bechor. Does that also apply to the substitute? That's the question. And he asks further, Bechor eno nifteh timurato mahu. You cannot redeem the original bechor animal. If you make a substitute and the substitute becomes holy also, does it have the same laws as the original and you can't redeem it? Or maybe you can redeem animal B. Bechor eno nishkal belitra timurato mahu. Another law of bechor is that you cannot weigh it on a scale with a pound on the other side, with weights on the other side. This is how you would weigh even a live animal on the marketplace when you're selling a live animal sold by weight. You can't do that to a bechor. Even if it gets a blemish, you cannot sell it that way. He can share it and give it to other people, or just sell it by an estimation, but you can't put it on a scale. It's not proper, not respectful to do that. That's true regarding the original animal, but how about the one that you use as a substitute? Animal B, is that, can you weigh that on the scale, or does it have the same stringency as the original bechor? Those are his questions. Amar Rava Tanya, bechor maaser mi shehu memu osin timura utmuratan kayose bahen. Rava answers with a baraita that a bechor animal or maaser animal, once it gets a blemish, then if you make a timura, the timura animal will have the same laws as the original. This means even if it has a blemish, it would be true also, well, the more so, before it has a blemish, if it's a holy animal, it's going to be a korban. And then if you make a timura, you're not allowed to, and both animals will be holy. And certainly in that case, the timura has the same laws. And even if it's gets a blemish, in which case it's less holy, it's no longer going to be a korban. Still, if you make a timura, the timura will have the same laws as the original. So the answer to Rami Bar Chama's questions is prohibited in all those cases. Ba'e Rami Bar Chama. Now he asks more questions. Hitpis bechor lebedek habayit ma'u sheishkol belitra. Let's say a kohen has a bechor animal and he dedicates the value of the bechor to temple maintenance, meaning the value of it, if it's worth $200, then he's going to have to give the $200 to the Bet HaMikdash. And the problem is that we don't know precisely how much an animal is worth unless we weigh it. So can he weigh it on a balance scale with pound weights on the other side in order to see exactly how much he owes? Adif or Maziluta de Bechor Adif? Do we say that the increase, the profit for Hekdesh is more important, and you're going to get the best price? You want to evaluate how much would it go on a market, on an auction. So if you're able to weigh it precisely, then you'll get a better price in the market, because you'll know the buyer will know exactly how much it is and how much he can profit from it. So do we say in this case that because the money is going to Hekdesh, that is more important than the disrespect that one is doing to the bechor animal, and therefore you only can't weigh it if you're going to keep the money yourself. Then it's not nice to weigh it. But if the proceeds are going to the Hekdesh, then you can weigh it. Or do we say, no, the demeaning of the firstborn is more important, and even though the money is going to the Bet HaMikdash, you can't demean it. That means you're going to have to just sell it by estimation, which will be less money, but you can't demean it. That's the question of Rami Bar Chama. Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Zevida Tashema. Rabbi Yosef bar Zevida says we can try to answer this question from our Mishnah. That's why we brought this question here in the first place. Nit'aravu bebechor ubemaaser. Yir'u ad she'ista'avu v'ya'achlu kebechor uchmaaser. Lav lememra de'eno nishkal belitra. The Mishnah teaches that if a regular korban, a korban olah or whatever, gets mixed up with a bechor animal or a maaser animal, you don't know which one is which, then you let them graze until they get a blemish. And then he eats the animals like a bechor and like a maaser. In other words, he will take the value of the more expensive one, whichever it is, because maybe that's the korban, and he will have to take that amount of money and go ahead and buy another animal to replace the korban olah. And now, we don't actually know which one is the olah and which one is the bechor. And so now, when it says here that he's going to evaluate, so evaluate what? By weighing it to get the biggest price? No, it seems not, because it says he consumes them like a bechor. That means he has to treat them both like a bechor, because either one might be a bechor, and therefore, he has to worry, and he's going to redeem the other one, so that the other one that was an olah will no longer be sanctified anymore once he redeems it. So he'll be able to eat it. So he's allowed to eat both, but since one of them is a bechor, he still has to treat both of them with that level of sanctity. So therefore, when it says that he has to eat it like a bechor, doesn't that mean that he does not weigh it by weight, by litra, meaning on a scale? Now that will end up meaning that the evaluation will be less, because when he takes the bigger of the animals and puts it on the market and he can't actually weigh it, so he's only going to get an estimation, and the people on the market will pay less for it. And that money is going to go to buying a korban for the Bet HaMikdash. So by not weighing it, it will cause some slight loss to the Bet HaMikdash. Nevertheless, the respect for the Bechor outweighs the loss of the Bet HaMikdash. So we learn from here that also in the case where a Kohen who has a Bechor and he donates it to its value to Bedek HaBayit, then it will be the same thing, that he cannot weigh it out, even though that will be some loss to the Bet HaMikdash. The honor, the respect for the Bechor is more important. Seems like a good proof. However, these sages say, no, the two cases are not similar. Hatam shetei kedushot ushne gufin. Hachash shetei kedushot veguf ehad. In that case of the Mishnah, it's two types of kedusha. You have two animals there and two animals. There's two animals there, and one is holding as a bechor, the other as a sacrifice. And so now you're going to evaluate the worth of them so that you can figure out the worth of the thing that will be a sacrifice. So here the question is, can you downgrade, can you disrespect the bechor in order to give an upgrade to the other animal, which is first of all a different type of kedusha, because it's a sacrificial animal versus a bechor, and second of all, it's a different animal altogether. So there, since it's two different animals, it makes sense that you cannot weigh it by in a scale, because you can't desecrate one animal for the benefit of the other one. However, in our case that we were questioning, we're talking about, it's true, two types of kedusha. One is kedushat bechor, and the other is kedushat bedek habayit, where bedek habayit is just the monetary value that you're donating. So in that sense, it's the same, but it's different in that we're talking about the very same animal. We're taking this very bechor, and now he donated its value. So we want to know if we can desecrate somewhat this animal, this bechor, for the sake of the value of this very animal that we are taking and that we are going to donate. And so therefore, you cannot learn from the case in our Mishnah where it's talking about two different animals, and you're desecrating one for the benefit of the other one. There it makes sense that you cannot do that. But here, where you would be desecrating it for its own value that he's going to donate, it's just he's transferring it from one type of holiness to another type of holiness. Maybe in this case, you would be able to weigh it out by litra, and so there's no proof from this our Mishnah. Matkif la Rabbi Yosef bar Avin, ma ilu amar hafdu li bechor shitpiso lebedek habayit kelum shomrin lo. And now Rabbi Yosef bar Avin is going to object to the possibility that you could weigh this bechor out on a scale and thereby desecrate it. You really think that would be possible? If someone said, I want to redeem this firstborn animal. He has a firstborn and he wants to redeem it, and I'm going to donate the amount amount to the temple treasury. Would we listen to him? Obviously, we would not. We would say, you can't redeem a firstborn, and we would not do it. And therefore, just like you would not listen to him and you would not redeem it, so too, we cannot allow him to weigh out an animal that he donates its value to it. I'm not going to violate a law just because a person wants to make a donation. So that seems to be an argument against. But when then we say, no, this challenge is not a good challenge because hafdu rachamana Latifeh. If a person wants to redeem it, that's a deoraita law. The Torah says that you cannot redeem it. So of course we're not going to listen to him and redeem it and violate a Torah law just so that we can get a donation. However, you can't bring a proof from here regarding weighing the bechor, because weighing the bechor is only a d'Rabbanan law. It's a slight desecration of it. And so there you might say, okay, for this slight desecration, causing it the disrespect, midrabanan, but you donated it, and so now we should give maximum value to the Bet HaMikdash, and that overrides this slight disrespect that's only midrabanan. So maybe indeed it would. You can't bring a proof from the way he formulated it of haftu. Ela amar Rabbi Ameh kilum hikna zeh ela ma shekanu lo. Rather, a different objection to the possibility that this would be allowed, which is by Rabbi Ameh. He says, can the Kohen transfer to the Bet HaMikdash more than he received himself? In other words, the Bechor, a shepherd, he has a Bechor animal, he gives it to the Kohen. The Kohen earns the right to, number one, sacrifice it if it doesn't have a mum. If it does have a mum, then he can consume it. He can share with others too, but he cannot weigh it out. So he receives the ability to consume it, but not weigh it out. And so therefore, since he only has that ability, he cannot donate more than he has. So very good. You want to donate to the temple treasury? Chazak u'baruch. Go ahead and do that. But you're going to donate only that which you yourself have. And since he cannot weigh it out for himself, therefore, he has no right to weigh it out for the temple treasury. And even though that means the temple treasury will get a slightly lower estimation, a slightly lower value, but so be it. That's all that the Kohen has a right to donate in the first place, because that's all that he owns. The end of the Mishnah teaches that all offerings might get mixed up with each other except for Hatat and Asham. If you have Hatat animals and Asham animals that get mixed up, that's not an intermixture because you can tell them apart. So now we say, how can you tell them apart? Ma'ishana Hatat ve'Asham, Tahai Zachar ve'Hai Nekeba. Because Asham animals are males and Hatat animals are females. And so if they get mixed up, then if you know that there's only Chatat and Ashams in here, then you'll know that the Zachars are Ashams and the Nekevas are Chatats, and you'll separate them. So we ask about that. Chatat ve'ola nameh. Chatat is always female, and ola is always male. So therefore, how come the Mishnah says that all types of korbanot can get mixed up with each other, and then you'd have to follow the procedure in the beginning of the Mishnah, except for Chatat and Asham? It should also say, except for Chatat and ola. The answer is Ika Se'ir Nasi. There is the Korban Hatat that a Nasi brings, the king brings it if he sins, and although it's a Hatat, it is a male, and therefore there is a type of Hatat that is a male that could get mixed up with an Olah, and therefore there is such a possibility of Hatat and Olah getting mixed up. That's why the Mishnah did not mention that. Now, what about the Sa'ir of Nasi if it gets mixed up with an Asham? So here, Asham is Zachar, and you also have this type of Korban Hatat that is an Asham, that is a Hatat. And they're all males, so how come you don't worry about that mixture? The answer is Hai Se'ar ve'Hai Semer. They are different types of animals, because the Hatat of the Nasi is Sa'ir, is a goat, and so now you could tell from the hair that that's a goat, whereas the other one, the Asham, is from a sheep, which has wool, and so you'll be able to tell the type of animal apart. Now we ask further, Pesach ve'asham name la mi'arav. Hai ben shana v'hai ben shete shanim. How come when the Mishnah says the following two cannot get mixed up because you could tell them apart, how come it only mentions chatat and asham? Why not mention also Pesach and asham? Those cannot get mixed up with each other because although they're the same type of animal, they're different ages. A korban Pesach has to be within the first year and asham has to be in the second year. So you could tell them apart. Two answers. Ika asham nazir v'asham mesorah. There are some asham types of asham sacrifices that are 1 year old. That would be an asham that a nazir brings or a mesorah brings. And so if that was that type of korban, and it got mixed up with Korban Pesach, you would not be able to tell them apart. So the Mishnah is not going to say only certain types of Hasham. You can't say Pesach v'Hasham because it doesn't apply to all Hasham. Ve'iba et ema, ika ben shana demechze keben shete shanim, ve'ika ben shana shetayim demechze keben shana. And another answer is sometimes there's a 1 year old animal that looks more mature than its age. It looks like it's 2 years old. And there are those within their second year that kind of look young and they look like they're within their first year. And so if they're kind of in between, then it will still be difficult to tell them apart. So therefore, the Mishnah does not mention Pesach and Asham that as something that does not get mixed up. If Pesach and Asham get mixed together, then you cannot tell them apart, and then you will follow the procedure of the Mishnah. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.